All right, welcome to episode 5 of the JP Pod. Let's get right into it today. There was an update on the cargo ship incident in Baltimore that wrecked a bridge. The NFSC, which is the New Federal State of China, it's a news outlet, published an exclusive intel report that the Baltimore cargo ship accident was actually a terrorist attack from China. They claim that China used remote towing technology to wreck the cargo ship. And they talk about how this port impacts the entire world, not just the United States. A large amount of military shipments, including shipments to Ukraine, actually come out of this port. So what does that tell you? That this was strategic. It wasn't random. What are the odds that an isolated accident like this happens at such an important port where military shipments come in and out, and a large amount of shipments, important shipments worldwide, actually come out of this port, and that military shipments to Ukraine actually come out of this port? Kind of makes you think that it was more strategic instead of random. These attacks, on top of Chinese military-aged men coming through our border, it appears that we're being lulled to sleep by China. I don't think this was the only cyber attack incident from China on something like a ship. I mean, there have been many random F-16s crashing, or any military plane crashing, mainly F-16s, while training, just kind of randomly their systems scrambled. And, I wouldn't be surprised if this is just another instance of China testing out its abilities and its technology on us. And, I mean, these are terrorist attacks. I don't know the exact number, but it was something like 12, maybe more, maybe less, people died from this bridge collapsing who were on the bridge. And, I mean, wrecking such an important port, not only for us, but for countries worldwide, that's extremely reckless. And, I mean, it's a terrorist attack. Obviously, if the government even knew that this was a Chinese terrorist attack, they're not going to come out and say it. I mean, this has been our strategy with opposing countries during this whole administration, during the Biden administration. I mean, look how we handle Iran. We cower down to them. We let them know before we respond to them killing 3 of our soldiers. We respond to them, giving them advance notice on what we're going to do in Syria, making sure they get all important military leaders out of there. So it's more of a show than anything. So, the Biden administration's weakness towards opposing countries, they cower down to them. So even if they did know that this was a Chinese terrorist attack, they're not going to do anything about it. They're going to act like they don't know. The intel report actually alluded to possibly U.S. military officials knowing about this beforehand. They didn't have enough evidence to conclusively say that, but they alluded to that being a possibility. So is this a crisis sort of going on behind the scenes of China using their cyber attack technologies and wrecking our equipment, not only our military equipment, but hacking cargo ships to take down ports that are so important ports like this? This is a problem. They don't fear us. They're going to test this stuff out, and if they're testing it out on U.S. specific infrastructure systems like power grids or our own military equipment like F-16 fighter jets, then what are they preparing for? Are they preparing to do something large? Are they testing our responses on things? There was little minor cyber attacks on power grids nationwide, and then the AT&T incident happened. That could have been a cyber attack, could have not been, but if it was, I mean, that's a widespread. They're looking at our response to widespread stuff like that. Not only testing our systems, like our infrastructure systems and power grids, but they're looking at how we respond. And if we respond by not responding and lying to our own citizens, if this was indeed a Chinese cyber attack, then that's not good, because we're giving China the wrong message. We're giving China the message of, we will do nothing if you launch a widespread cyber attack against us. And it's fully possible. I mean, the government has talked about how outdated our systems are, but they're not doing anything about it. And even if we did do something about it, it would take a long period of time. It's probably too late to do that. Our systems are not hard to hack into. Our power grids are extremely vulnerable, and I'm not saying something will happen, but if China is doing this stuff to test our response, then what are they preparing for? Why else would they be doing stuff like this? Why else would they be hacking into our power grids and testing our responses? Why would they be launching terrorist attacks like this cargo ship incident? I mean, that is a declaration of war. Launching a terrorist attack against another global superpower and taking down such an important port like that is a declaration of war, essentially. In today's age, there's really no official declarations of war. I mean, if you're looking for one, that's a phenomenal one. To hack into a cargo ship and take down a bridge, kill people, and like I said, take down such an important port like that. I mean, what else do you need? So if this is true, if this was a Chinese cyber attack, terrorist attack, then we need to do something instead of handle it behind the scenes. Even if they did, the Biden administration knew this was a Chinese attack, you could say that they're not going to portray to the public their response. I don't think they would have a response. And if they did, it would be some stop, don't do that again. Shame on you, don't do that. I mean, it would be nothing. And that's not me assuming. That's me seeing how the Biden administration has reacted to, like I mentioned earlier, the Iranian attack. I mean, it wasn't a direct Iranian attack. It was sort of through its proxies. But, I mean, they're going to come out and openly claim Iran did this. Iran's the bad guy. Iran's the bad guy. But then they're going to give them advance notice on what they're going to do. And it's extremely weak. We are portraying ourselves to all of our enemies and to the world as extremely weak. We will not respond if you do stuff like this to us. So, like I said, if this is indeed a Chinese terrorist attack, we need to do something conclusive to send a message to China. This will not be tolerated. But we're not going to. This is not going to happen. So, again, you have to ask the question of, why is China doing this? Why are they testing our response on this? Are they preparing for something much bigger? Are they preparing to shut down our power grids, or even if it's not something as widespread as that, hamstring us militarily and then launch an attack on Taiwan to where we're limited in our response? There was already a satellite picture of China had set up in its training facilities streets that mocked and looked exactly like the downtown, like the capital area of Taiwan, wherever the Taiwan government buildings are in Taiwan, there were streets set up identical to wherever that is. So they're training for this. They are preparing for an attack on Taiwan. So we've already said many times we will blindly support Taiwan and defend them against China. And, you know, if China launches something to where we can't respond right away because if there's an attack, like I said, even if it's not a widespread terrorist attack, I mean, they've been potentially testing on knocking down our F-16s. So, if they did launch an attack on Taiwan and we tried to respond, and they've already tested that, they've got it down to a T of how to knock down our jets, it could become a problem. So, this was very interesting. I alluded to it early in the last podcast and on clips that this could have been a cyber attack. This was kind of a really weird thing that happened randomly. There's not a lot of cargo ships just kind of losing power and wrecking bridges like this, especially at one of such an important port like that. But now we have intel reports like this. The NFSC seems convinced that this was a cyber attack with the remote towing technology from China. So that's really concerning. You have to wonder, like I said, what is China preparing for? And this is hands down, this no debate, this was a terrorist attack. We had a potential terrorist attack from China in our own borders, knocking down our own infrastructure. That is a problem. and something that should be addressed if true and handled. It won't be because of who we have as our leader. It's extremely troubling, and we have to stop portraying ourselves as so weak to other governments and other countries worldwide, especially our enemies. That leads me into the next topic. There is a 60-minute special on Havana syndrome, possibly being a Russian bioweapon against U.S. high-ranking officials. If you don't know what Havana syndrome is, it's a cognitive dysfunction that can lead to significant brain damage. It has symptoms like ringing in the ears and it's cognitive issues. The expert claimed that he believed Russia had something to do with it very early on in his investigation and said that the people affected were officials who recently did something against Russia to where Russia would have a reason to go after them. So this, along with the Chinese cyber attacks and potentially a Chinese terrorist attack and the migrants coming through our border, we are victims of attacks from foreign nations. I mean, the U.S. is no stranger to bioweapons. I mean, we have bioweapons in Ukraine. But this, coupled with what China is doing to us, subtly attacking us and our officials, this is becoming a problem. We have two global superpowers uniting against us. I talked about this in the last podcast. There's a new world order forming. The unipolar world is over. The multipolar world is here. And it appears that China and Russia are uniting to be at the top of that. And we're not. We're alienating ourselves from these people. We're making them our enemies. And they're uniting against us and attacking us. We are already at war with Russia via Ukraine. And if these claims are true with the cargo ship, then China has already launched a war. That is a declaration of war. Cyber attacks and terrorist attacks, they could coincide with one another, even if it's not Russia. I mean, if we have sort of a global, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then you could have countries like China and Russia uniting like they are. And Russia is already allying with Iran, so is China and North Korea. So behind the scenes, could they collaborate and launch a widespread cyber attack that knocks out our power grids? And with the sleeper cells of terrorists that are, I would like to say potentially in our country, but the FBI has already said that they are in our country and even listed the cities that they potentially are in. So if you have those coincide with one another, say Iran activates its Hezbollah terrorist cells that are potentially here, and you couple that with a Chinese cyber attack that knocks out our power grids, we're looking at no power, no way to communicate with each other. There would be chaos across the nation. And then you have terrorist attacks taking place of Hezbollah terrorists, just wreaking havoc, and we have no power. That is catastrophic. And then likely China would then launch an attack on Taiwan. Who knows what North Korea would do? I mean, they could give North Korea the green light to just start shooting missiles at us. They've been dying to do that forever. That could be a problem. We are making a lot of enemies globally that really, really hate us and have the potential. I mean, we've been lulled to sleep here. We got terrorists coming through our border, creating sleeper cells across the nation. We have China testing out our response with cyber attacks on our infrastructure systems and potentially on systems like AT&T. And then you have potentially a terrorist attack on a cargo ship. They have the potential to do some catastrophic things to us. And we're not making our case any better. We continue to alienate ourselves, isolate ourselves, make more and more enemies. Oh, but we have NATO. Sorry, NATO will not put up a fight against the likes of China, Russia, and Iran, North Korea, and all BRICS. I mean, we would lose that battle. Because really, NATO is the United States and then its little sidekicks. If the United States falls, NATO stands no chance. So if an attack gets launched on us, if we get hit first, there's no we're going to hit back. It's going to be a devastating blow. I mean, if we have no power, nationwide, not globally, nationwide, launched with terrorist attacks, we can't respond if China launches an attack against Taiwan. But even if we do, they have the potential to scramble our fighter jets and knock them down, scramble the systems and knock them down. It would not be a very fair fight. Not only would it be horrible militarily, but you would have terrorists running and wreaking havoc on our nation, and we don't have power. We can't warn others. It would be a disaster. You can only imagine how much of a disaster that would be. Let alone after that how many Americans do you think could survive three days without power? It would be awful. It would be a nightmare. And like I said, we have many enemies that are dying to wipe us off the face of the earth. You have them chanting in their government meetings and their parliament meetings, their parliament sessions, chanting death to America. We are not liked globally, and our presence in the Middle East for the last 20 to 30 years, we've made a lot of enemies over there, and we're being lulled to sleep. And our open border is not making that any easy. It's not making that any better, because we're just opening the door to an attack on us. Not just a cyber attack, but when you have sleeper cells, there's no telling how many terrorist sleeper cells there are nationwide. And it should horrify you, because the FBI has openly admitted that there are gotaways and talked about the sleeper cells that are potentially being formed, and even named the cities. I mean, I don't have the list in front of me, but you can go do your own research on that. This is not a secret. And it's something our enemies have the capability to wipe us off the face of the earth. And, so do we, but we're the victims of all of these attacks. And what we're doing in Ukraine is not making that any better. We're continuing to make enemies with other people, and we're isolating ourselves. There's a new world order forming, and we will be on the losing side of that with how we're acting right now. So this should worry every American. And if these are all true with the terrorist cells nationwide and the attacks like the cargo ship attacks, it may be too little too late. And there's not much an American can do other than keep your head on a swivel and prepare yourselves for the possibility of this, and stay strong and be prepared if something happens, if the power gets knocked out and these sleeper cells get activated, just to prepare yourself for that. But like I said, we need to change course here and start making more friends than enemies, because the enemies of our enemies become friends and they unite. And when you have two global superpowers like China and Russia uniting against us, it's not good. So all we can do is pray that there's a change of course, a change of strategy, and we start really looking at the potential here of what could happen if we don't. China has not openly, if these allegations are true that this was a cyber terrorist attack, it is a declaration of war. And we're not going to do anything about it, I don't believe. Even if we did know that that was the case. We have to start responding to these people, responding to these countries who do this to us with strength, not weakness, like we have been. Unless this stuff will continue to happen, and they will feel no reason not to launch an attack like that on us. The new world order is forming. The unipolar world is over, and we have to adjust to it, or else we will fall as a country. And it will be ugly, and it will be catastrophic, and it will be horrible if an attack like that is launched on us. We don't realize that. Our government does not realize that. I mean, the FBI is openly saying how much of a terrorist threat there is. There's never been one like this before. We're not doing anything about it. I went down a real tangent there. Started talking about the Havana syndrome, but I was using that as an illustration of our enemies are uniting against us and are launching attacks on us like that. And it's a sign of what's potentially to come if we don't change course here. I want to talk about Israel conducted airstrikes in Damascus, and Iran confirmed that a leader of the Iranian National Guard Corps, Mohammad Reza Zahidi, is dead from these attacks. He was the target of these attacks, I believe. This is significant, especially if you look at how Iran responds to these sort of things. Only look how they respond to the death of Soleimani. Iran said that they will respond with decisive action. Something is about to give in the Middle East, I believe. I mean, you look, Ramadan ends April 9th. And will there be an escalation after that? Will more countries get involved? Will they launch a holy war against Israel and the United States? The former Colonel Douglas McGregor believes so. He's openly talked about how he believes the ending of Ramadan could launch a wide escalation from the Muslim countries surrounding Israel, like Iran, Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon. You got the Houthis in Yemen. Sort of the ring of fire around Israel. He's alluded to how the ending of Ramadan could potentially launch an escalation from these countries against Israel in the war against Hamas. Either Hamas is defeated before the end of Ramadan, likely won't happen, but even if that did happen, either Israel moves to Hezbollah or it continues to allow these threats to be around its country and they will eventually be attacked. Or a ceasefire is reached and potential big changes to happen in the Middle East and will be against Israel. Any ceasefire that happens will be a trap for Israel because Israel has nothing but enemies surrounding them. So something is about to give. And a potential holy war, I mean, this is already a holy war in the Muslims' eyes, but could they use the ending of Ramadan potentially as a reason to launch a wider holy war against Israel and the United States, especially if they have sleeper cells in the U.S.? Could they launch a wider attack against Israel and then activate those cells at the same time? Potentially. And then you look, the U.S. is slowly abandoning Israel leading up to the end of Ramadan. I mean, we didn't veto the ceasefire resolution in the UN the first time. We haven't done that. We didn't vote for it. We abstained from the vote, but that really is a vote for it, because if you vetoed every single one up to then and you abstain from one, I mean, that's a vote for it essentially. And you look at, I've already talked about in past episodes, Biden's disdain for Netanyahu, along with people like Chuck Schumer. I mean, they're openly going against the leader of an ally while they were at war. So the tide seem to be turning with the U.S. abandoning Israel, especially with Biden looking to win back his young voters who are going against him because of the war in Gaza and the U.S.'s foreign policy there. So I believe something is about to give in the Middle East, especially with the ending of Ramadan coming up in I think it's a week and a day from today. Today's Monday. Could a wider conflict start with the Muslim nations surrounding Israel? They've already talked about a potential war with Hezbollah, between Hezbollah and Israel, is sort of inevitable. They've already sort of been launching missiles back and forth. Nothing really serious, but more sort of doing it for show. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there seems to be no end in sight here. All the ceasefire resolutions, I mean, one just got adopted, but really, a permanent ceasefire, Israel will never agree to it. I don't believe, until Hamas is fully defeated, which there's still some time. There still needs to be time for them to do that. They're not done with their military objectives yet. So something has to give eventually. Either all of Iranians' proxies get involved directly with Israel, potentially the head of the snake Iran getting directly involved. If that were to happen, the U.S. would kind of have to get involved, and then now we have a direct conflict with the U.S. and Iran, who's already got sleeper cells here. So I say all that to say something has to give eventually here. And could the ending of Ramadan potentially be that? I believe that, this airstrike that killed this Iranian leader, that could potentially be another reason to launch. I mean, there were airstrikes in Israel, the Golan Heights, yesterday from Gaza. So could you couple this airstrike, this Iranian leader being killed in Damascus, not even in Gaza, it's in Damascus, because that appears to be where Iran is having its leaders often. I mean, there's been many airstrikes in Damascus. Could this, along with the ending of Ramadan, be a reason for Iran to launch a wider or direct conflict with Israel? People believe so. I mean, Tucker Carlson even said he believes the ending of Ramadan could, there would be a wider conflict take place. And if that were to happen, things could get really ugly. I mean, you look at what happened on October 7th. Things escalated really, really fast. Hostages were taken, and it was gut-wrenching to watch. Any American should not want a direct conflict with the United States and Iran. I mean, people like Lindsey Graham are bloodthirsty for it. He wants it so bad for whatever reason. But if this were to happen, and the ending of Ramadan kicks off a wider conflict with more countries attacking Israel and potentially the United States, then it could get really bad really fast. I mean, globally, tensions are so unbelievably high, and the United States and allies like Israel appear to be on the receiving end of it. They're on the losing side of it. I mean, China and Russia are uniting against the United States, and I've already talked about that earlier in this episode. But then you have the potential of a wider conflict to take place in Israel from other Muslim countries. And then you look at the Ukraine conflict, there's no end in sight for that, even though it's been a stalemate for months. Tensions are high globally, and something like this Israeli conflict could spark a global conflict with many countries, aka a world war. It would look nothing like the earlier world wars. It would just be utter destruction if it goes to the same lengths. There would be no feet on the ground conflict. It would just be nuclear war. But with the ending of Ramadan coming up, experts are believing that this could start a wider conflict like that. Things could get really scary really fast, like I said. So pray that doesn't happen, but I have to say there's no end in sight for this war in Israel either. Israel's not caving to the pressure, even from its own ally, the United States. It's not stopping its military objections. It's only continuing them, and it's only making countries angrier at Israel. The Israeli sentiment globally is only rising, including with its own ally. The United States is slowly abandoning them. So if a wider conflict does start sometime next week after Ramadan's over, it would not look pretty for Israel. And Israel needs the support of the United States to stay alive as a nation. I mean, Israel's lucky that Hamas kind of went rogue and all of its Iranian proxies didn't launch an attack simultaneously, unless Israel may not even be here anymore. It needs the support of the United States right now, in this time, with potentially a wider conflict being launched soon. Like, Ramadan ends next Tuesday, like I said, and the U.S. is slowly abandoning them. it's not looking good for Israel if a wider conflict does happen. So Israel, the United States needs to continue to stand by Israel. It's not a genocide going on in Gaza. Isolated incidents happen, that's war, but widespread, there's not an ethnic cleansing. There's people are being put in harm's way by Hamas, and Israel needs to continue to fight to eliminate that threat. Israel has been surrounded by enemies its whole existence, but it appears that finally they may all unite and launch an attack simultaneously coming soon. And Israel needs the United States support during that. Unfortunately, it looks like that support is fading. So, God forbid, Ramadan, the ending of Ramadan, there's a wider conflict launched, because it will get very ugly very fast, not only in the Middle East, but potentially globally. If you look at Russia and China and North Korea, who are allied with Iran, Turkey too. Turkey doesn't get talked about enough. Turkey is the largest military in the Middle East, and it will be a very strong opponent against the allies of Israel. So if a wider conflict is launched and countries start getting involved, this almost happened after October 7th. Thank God the tension slowly went down, but it appears they may be ramping back up right now. And it would get really bad because of the countries who are allied with Israel and Iran. A global conflict could launch. I'm going down the worst case scenario, but the potential is there. And look at, I could go on and on about how this could be ugly. China and North Korea, I'm not even talking about Russia. So let's pray that the ending of Ramadan doesn't launch a wider conflict. But something has to give in the Middle East, I believe. Something has to give eventually. I don't know how long that will be. Could it be sometime next week? I don't know. But there appears to be no end in sight. And with the animosity towards Israel only rising globally, something has to give, and something will eventually give. And it could get really ugly if that happens. So we have to pray that that doesn't happen, that cooler heads prevail, but Israel and the United States are hated globally. We have made many enemies, and Israel's hated simply for being Israel. We have created our own enemies by our own doing. So, and they accuse the United States of being complicit in genocide, the Muslim countries who are backing Palestine. So we would be coupled with that. It would not just be an Israeli attack. It would be a United States attack. We would be attacked along with Israel. So if, God forbid, that does happen, we would be coupled on the receiving end of those attacks. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, Ramadan ends next Tuesday, and several experts are believing that this could launch a wider conflict, and the Muslim countries uniting to launch a holy war against Israel and the U.S. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, hopefully that doesn't happen, but the potential is there. And the Middle East is on fire, let alone the world is on fire. Enemies appear to be, like I said in the last episode, there appears to be a divide happening where enemies of enemies are becoming friends with each other and uniting against each other, and BRICS versus NATO appears to be the divide. And the potential for a world war is there. And pray cooler heads prevail, but the potential is there for that. And next week, the end of Ramadan, the potential is there for there to be a wider conflict launched in the Middle East. So let's pray that does not happen. But all right, that's all the topics for today. I will see you guys back here tomorrow.